The morning sun tried invading my overcrowded little kitchen through the curtains' holes, landing in faded spots on the dull counter, where I lined up my worn cups. I sat at the table holding my hands together, fighting the urge to call anyone, but nobody ever called me anymore, at least not just to hear my voice. I never drank coffee for myself, always sugar and milk for Leo, tea for Esther when she visited, black and strong for my boy, Pedro, 32 years old, grown and hairy but always my little boy in my mind. I say my mind, but most days the house belonged to him, to his preferences, his silences, his needs. My whole life shrank around keeping his world smooth. That's what mothers do, I thought, and smiled bitterly. 3 sacrifices stood out, though I tried not to count my old wounds. When Pedro was 7, and his dad left for good, I gave up my nursing course. So close to finishing, 1 semester left. But how to pay the fees? The money went with his father along with our plans, so I worked in 2 cleaning jobs. One in the hospital I was supposed to wear white uniforms in, and another cleaning offices at night. When Pedro dreamed of being a soccer player and begged for new boots, I canceled my dentist appointment. More than once. My molar aches still echo those days. And when my younger sister Maria's marriage ended and she needed a place, I offered her my bedroom and moved to the old sofa, all to avoid another fight between her and Pedro. It's easy to build a life out of making do. I did it without thinking, told myself, it's only for a season. When he's older, things will change. Mothers are made for sacrifice. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection, hunched in my housecoat, hair undyed for years, fingers red from bleach, and wonder where I'd gone. But I learned to swallow that question. The needs I neglected? Simple things. I wanted conversation at dinner that wasn't just Pedro scrolling his phone, a walk in the evening breeze for my knees, new shoes. Mostly I wanted someone to ask how I really felt, and not just what was for lunch. Sometimes I'd close my eyes for 5 minutes in the afternoon and imagine I was somewhere quiet and clean, not listening for the door. Financially, I scraped by. My cleaning jobs paid little, the government pension from Pedro's father even less. After the 3rd layoff, I sold my gold chain for bills. When Pedro got his job in the city, he offered to take over the mortgage payments. I believed he was helping. Now, he said, the house really was ours, but it was under his name, all neat and clever. Paperwork I barely followed, but I signed where he pointed. Bills always got paid late, and food sometimes ran out until my next shift. I felt squeezed out in my own home by the same boy I'd saved. Others saw me as solid, patient, maybe a bit tired. Donna Rita, always quiet, so dependable. At the grocery, neighbors would say, "You're lucky to have a son who helps." I agreed, too tired to argue. But inside I felt smaller each year, invisible, like the chair nobody sat on anymore. Sometimes memories would sneak up. One afternoon, mopping, I remembered young Pedro running in with muddy shoes, yelling, "My! Look at my drawing!" before leaping into my arms. My heart back then would leap too. I thought I'd always be needed. The second memory, darker. After a long shift, coming home to find Pedro's friends sprawled on the sofa, empty soda cans everywhere, and no thanks, no smile. Just, "There's nothing to eat?" The weight pressed and pressed. Our house, a faded blue with flaking walls, reflected me. The sofa sagged. The curtains were always drawn. I kept everything spotless, but nothing felt new. The quiet, especially at night, felt heavy. Oppressive most of all, when Pedro and Esther were out, laughter echoing from somewhere else. The kitchen smelled of bleach and old bread. That morning the kettle whistled for no one, and I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the scars of years. This was home, my nest and my cage, and I had built every inch by giving pieces of myself away. The day of the party started like any other, but inside I had a strange feeling, a knot that wouldn't go away. The living room was decked out with shiny balloons, plastic tablecloths, plates of snacks, the scent of fried pastels and brigadeiros heavy in the air. My daughter Lara's friends sparkled around her, laughter echoing above the late afternoon storm still rumbling outside. Even in the kitchen, as I set out another bottle of soda, I could hear the thumping music and bursts of cheers every time someone opened a gift. I don't know when, exactly, I became invisible. Early on, I floated among the guests, making sure everyone had juice or cake, that the bathroom was clean, that the little ones didn't put their sticky fingers all over the walls. Each time I tried to join a conversation, something innocent like talking about the taste of the cake or Lara's accomplishments, someone would interrupt, barely glancing my way, before redirecting the subject to themselves. The mothers from Lara's school stood in a tight semicircle by the window, sharing stories about vacations, jobs, and the latest fashion. I smiled, nodded, waited for an opening. It never came. At one point, I tried to offer a tray of coccinas. Rafaela, Lara's best friend's mother, gave a polite smile, then turned her back, her voice rising with forced delight. "Oh, Lara, your party is simply perfect. How lucky to have such a supportive family," she trilled, pointedly including Lara's father, Mauricio, in the compliment. He stood rigid beside her, arms slung loosely over our daughter's shoulders. I couldn't remember the last time he'd held me like that. Lara barely looked my way. I caught her eye after the candles were blown out, her face red from excitement, or maybe exhaustion. She moved quickly to her friends, her arm linking with Maurizio's instead of mine. It was during the group photo that it happened. Someone shouted, "Family only!" So I moved near Lara, ready to squeeze in. Maurizio hesitated. "Maybe you could take the picture for us, Lucia," he said, smiling as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. For a moment, silence buzzed in my ears, heavier than the storm outside. My hands trembled, but I nodded and took the phone, stepping away. The whole group posed, arms thrown around each other, Lara's smile wide, Mauricio grinning, my place beside them empty. The space I'd always fought for erased in a split second. Someone pressed a plate into my hand. "You should eat something, Lucia," their tone pitying. As I sat near the window, alone, forced laughter swelled behind me. Sweat broke out along my back. The cheap paper plate wobbled in my hands. I stared at a slice of cake I didn't want. "Heard Maurizio's new job is going great," one of the guests said in a low voice, not seeing me nearby. "Yes, finally. He's been under so much stress. So lucky he has such strong support," replied another. I tasted acid in my throat. My breath shallowed. The rain outside grew heavier, a thick scent of wet earth pushing through the open window. Even the kids ignored me. Rafaela's daughter brushed past, sticky fingers grazing my skirt. "Sorry, Senora," she mumbled, her eyes flicking away as she joined a cartoonish dance in the living room. I tried to speak to Lara once, quietly. "Love, is everything all right? Do you need anything?" She shook her head, eyes darting to the doorway where her friends called. "Nah, it's fine, Mai," she said, her voice muffled, distracted. The voices in the room grew louder, the air heavy with fried food, perfume, and sugary drinks. Their laughter thudded in my chest like knocks on a locked door. I forced myself to sit upright. Someone handed me a garbage bag. "Could you help clear up the mess, Lucia? You're always so organized." Not a please, not a thank you. That was the drop that made my cup overflow. My hands started to shake. I wanted to scream, to throw the bag on the ground, but all I did was grip it tighter, feeling the plastic cut into my palm. I mumbled something. Maybe a yes, maybe nothing at all. As the party wound down, no one looked for me. The last guests left. Mauricio disappeared without saying goodnight. Lara retreated to her room with the gifts. I was left among crumbs, balloons sticking to the floor, and plastic cups half filled with flat soda. All that remained was the echo of laughter and the ache of being less than a shadow, pulled in, used up, and left behind, not even worthy of a family photo. The next morning, as the first streaks of light came in through the slit in my cortina, I sat at the foot of my bed, feet pressed to the cold floor, silent hands gripping the blanket like a lifeline. The apartment was quiet except for the faint whir of the fridge in the kitchen. My old slippers rested nearby, and for some reason I pushed them away, feeling the need to actually touch the ground beneath me, feel its rough chill and stay grounded. I was awake, but a piece of Mim tried to sink back, to buscar o calor da rotina, e esquecer tudo. I couldn't. Something in me had snapped the night before, and as meus olhos fitavam a parede manchada pela umidade, I knew that going back would be mais doloroso que enfrentar o desconhecido. For the first time since I can remember, I didn't put a panela de café for anyone. Nada para esperar, ninguém para agradar. All morning I kept replaying every humiliation, every thank you that never meant anything, every old feeling that I had swallowed. I thought of meus filhos grown, of my ex-husband's face the last time he came buscar os documentos que eu guardei por anos, treating me like a secretária mal paga. I thought of Sonia, minha irmã sozinha, once my confidant, now nothing but silence when I called. I lived so much for others that it felt extraño asking myself what I wanted. I barely knew. It was still early when I finally levanté, the decision made quietly inside me, like a stone settling. I went to the tiny room that used to be meu escritorio, now a deposito for caixas, records, and memories that didn't belong to me. Caixas de fotos dos outros, lembranças das crianças, pastas com documentos de todo mundo menos meus. That room always smelled de papel velho e poeira, and as I stood in the doorway, I saw how this amontoado represented anos inteiros onde eu não fui vista. Carefully, I started separating tudo que não era meu. Papeladas do meu filho adulto, quadernos da faculdade, recordações do antigo trabalho do meu marido, objects that weighed the shelves, and my spirit. One by one, I stacked them near the door, quietly, afraid that if I fizesse barulho demais, alguém apareceria para impedir. But no one veio. The apartment felt pregnant with expectation, and my heart pulsed in my chest. The sky behind the window was cinza, but within me, a tiny flame was starting. It took most of the morning to sort through the clutter, but what me impressionou foi como, entre cada papel descartável, havia espaço desabitado, canto que era só meu, and had remained untouched for years. I found a little notebook, uma velha caderneta almost empty, and stared at its cover. My name written in an awkward hand from when I was young. An old dream, that caderno. Fiquei olhando, wondering if I even remembered who I was then. Every shuffle of paper, every caixa removida, freed space inside me. The act of saying, isso não é meu, about each object felt like regaining a breath that havia perdido há muito tempo. It was not explosivo. There were no gritos, no great drama, just little motions, simple and firm. After hours, a small pile stood by the door, waiting. All the rest I put back on shelves now half empty. No one called. No one apareceu para perguntar ou para impedir. Era como se finalmente eu tivesse deixado de existir para eles. But instead of fear, what surprised me was the sense of alívio. The silence was heavy, sim, mas pela primeira vez eu consegui escutar meus próprios passos na casa, no longer drowned out by the needs of outros. I texted meu filho. Há caixas tuas aqui. Estão prontos para você buscar quando quiser. Minhas mãos tremiam, mas ficou por isso. I said nothing more. No apologies, no explanations. At lunch I made a single prato for myself and sentei à mesa. O sol começando a lançar faixas douradas sobre a toalha. O aroma do arroz simples, que nunca fazia só para mim, parecia pequeno luxo. The space around me, still marcado pelo tempo, now felt strangely novo. Not bigger, but lighter. My chest, once so apertado, opened. I could breathe deeper. There was a moment, as I tossed the last shelf of anti-gas lembranças, that a doubt crept in. Will they see me as cruel? Would I survive their anger or indifference? I almost reached for my phone para desfazer tudo, but I stopped. No one has ever doubted their right to fill my house with their things, with their problems. Now, reclaiming a shelf, I felt a fragile alegria, subtle but alive. As late afternoon light warmed the room, I stood in the midst of my new silence, hands pale with dust, but my eyes were dry. I was scared, yes, but the fear didn't paralyze me. I traced my fingers over the empty part of the shelf, and for a moment, I smiled. It was a small act, a first step, but it was mine. That evening I made tea and sat by the janela, feeling the weight on my shoulders start to dissolve. Not dissipate entirely, but soften. Each small decision, cada limite posto, was a seed. I caught my reflection in the glass and for once didn't look away. I knew the phone would ring, and maybe soon they would knock. But this time, I had chosen. This time, my will had shape, and I had given it space to exist. I woke up mais cedo do que o habitual naquele dia. O céu ainda escuro pela janela da cozinha, as paredes frias, o silêncio pesado demais. Mas algo em mim era diferente. Normalmente eu levantaria pressionada pelo relógio, pensando no almoço, no lanche da minha filha, no café do meu marido. Mas hoje, tudo em mim estava quieto, focado. Acendi a luz amarela da cozinha, senti o chiado da lâmpada e o cheiro familiar do pó de café recém-passado. Fiz o café só pra mim. Suguei o aroma forte. Demorei mais tempo na primeira xícara, consciente da leveza que isso trouxe para meus ombros. Não adiantei nada do almoço, não arrumei o quarto dos outros. Enrolei as dívidas em um elástico. Guardei as contas pela metade sobre a mesa. Sentei com meu próprio prato de pão. Era tão raro não estar cuidando de alguém que até a cadeira parecia outra. Peguei com mão firme o envelope escondido atrás das panelas, dentro do armário trancado. O nome do meu marido escrito num papel colado à tampa. Pura formalidade porque nem ele sabia da existência daquele dinheiro. Anos colocando pequenas notas, 5, 10, 20 reais, cada moeda com o peso de um desejo negado. Sempre que eu mexia naquele envelope, sentia a culpa correr pelo corpo, imaginando meu marido dizendo: "Pra que guardar dinheiro, mulher? Minha filha, compra minha blusa nova então." E eu sempre cedendo. Dessa vez não. Sentei novamente. Conferi as notas. Habituei meus olhos a somar, a pensar, a calcular de cabeça. Ali havia o suficiente para um curso quase inteiro de línguas. O mesmo que namorei na tela do celular inúmeras noites, deletando mensagens antes de perguntar a opinião da família. Não pedi opinião hoje. Coloquei as notas em uma bolsa simples, vesti uma blusa discreta, prendi o cabelo, segurei o telefone na mão. Meu peito batia forte enquanto digitava o número da escola. Cada chamada soou como tambor dentro de mim. Quando ouvi a voz feminina atender do outro lado, quis recuar, mas insisti. "Quero me matricular nas aulas noturnas", falei. Voz seca, objetiva. Quando desliguei o telefone, a confirmação ecoou parede afora. Matriculada. Eu, de verdade. Por um instante, aquela cozinha minúscula ficou grande demais para minhas certezas. Fui para o quintal, sentei no degrau frio da lavanderia, pés descalços no chão de cimento, respiração profunda, o cheiro do sabão velho misturado ao vento da manhã, o latido do cachorro vizinho. Mas, pela primeira vez, eu estava íntegra ali, vazia de culpa. Meu corpo inteiro ficou ali parado, sentindo o novo espaço, vazio de cansaço, cheio de possibilidade. Pontualmente às 7 da manhã, minha filha apareceu, cara amassada, voz fina que reclamava: "Cadê meu pão?" Olhei, respirei. "Hoje você prepara o que quiser", respondi. Ela estranhou como se o mundo tivesse desabado em silêncio. Não movi um dedo. O tempo passou arrastado. Arrumei minha bolsa com calma. Saí para o trabalho. Peguei o ônibus sabendo que não pediria carona. Ouvi ao celular as vozes cotidianas das passageiras, conversas de rotina, reclamações sobre filhos e maridos. Pela janela vi as ruas que sempre me pareceram iguais. Mas não hoje. Hoje eu reparava nas árvores, no céu mudando de cor, em pequenas crianças indo para a escola. Da escola. Tudo seguia, mas havia brilho diferente ali, uma vibração só minha. No trabalho, fiz apenas o necessário. Não fiquei limpando a sala dos outros. Não me ofereci para cobrir intervalo. Cumpri o que me cabia com dignidade, mas sem submissão. Nas horas vagas, sentei para revisar anotações. Pesquisei sobre vagas. Atualizei meu currículo. Tímida, mas decidida. Não contei para ninguém. Uma colega tentou se aproximar. "Você não está muito calada hoje?" Respondi com um: "Estou bem, só focada em mim." Era pouco, mas era novo, suficiente para criar estranheza. Ao final do expediente, segui a escola de idiomas. O prédio simples, cheiro de papel, barulho do portão e vozes jovens no corredor. Cruzei por adolescentes animadas, homens apressados. Fui até a secretaria, entreguei o dinheiro, assinei meus dados firmemente no caderno de inscrições. A funcionária olhou surpresa ao ver uma mulher da minha idade. Sorri, mas não expliquei nada. Na volta fiquei olhando a paisagem do ônibus. Nas mãos, a cópia da inscrição. O papel trêmulo rasgou a linha da minha rotina. Cheguei em casa depois que todos já estavam jantando. Cruzei os olhares curiosos, as bocas semi-abertas, mas não parei. Fui para meu quarto, fechei a porta. Tirando as roupas do corpo, senti o suor frio, mas não do medo. Era coragem pela metade, saudade de mim. Coloquei o comprovante do curso debaixo do travesseiro. Peguei um livro antigo, comecei a ler alto no escuro, voz baixa só pra mim. O silêncio foi rompido, primeiro pela surpresa de um gesto, depois pela esperança de muitos. Comecei ali sozinha no quarto escuro, dizendo as palavras novas, avançando letra por letra, como quem planta um jardim de madrugada esperando a luz. No fim, antes de dormir, escrevi meu nome na primeira folha do livro, como uma criança marcando território num mundo desconhecido. Encostei a testa na janela, olhei a rua vazia, sussurrei. É pouco, mas é meu. E então, dormi. Pela primeira vez em muitos anos, sem nenhuma promessa a não ser feita a mim mesma. The days following my decision were not silent, not for a single moment. Early in the morning I heard the first attempt. A call from Clara, my daughter, her voice strained and unfamiliar. "Mom, we need to talk. I think you're overreacting," she said, her words wrapped in irritation more than care. I listened, but said nothing, letting the line ring hollow with my silence. That day the phone vibrated every hour, from Clara, from Paolo, my ex-husband, from even my sister Lucia, who had always been neutral, a Switzerland of the family, now strangely urgent. By midday the messages changed to Tom. "Look, you can't just leave us this way. Who do you think you are? Abandoning your family?" Paolo's voice echoed through the voicemail, cold, rehearsed, as if he was reading from a dusty script he'd been saving for an occasion like this. I deleted each one, breath tightening at each new alert, shoulders tense, stomach in knots. It was not the noise that hurt, but the meaning behind it. A family's disapproval could crush more than any silence. On the second morning, someone knocked at my door. Lucia, with her sorriso de compromiso, holding a bolo as si nothing broken had happened. "Let's sit and talk, Anna. They're worried." She spoke softly, but every word was a push. "Family is family, Anna. Don't you think you're being a little selfish now?" I watched her as she poured coffee, her hand shaking a little. I realized I had always been the one who steadied everyone. Now that I stepped back, even she seemed unmoored. When I refused an invitation to Sunday lunch, tradition, obligation, routine, they flooded my phone with family photos, old records of togetherness, as if to say, "Look what you're losing." There was guilt in their eyes, implied through pixels, and when I stared too long at a picture of Clara as a child on my lap, my resolve flickered. "They need me," whispered the old voice. "You need you," replied something newer, shaky but louder this time. On day 3, my sister called again, her tone different now, mixed with frustration and disbelief. "Anna, everyone's talking. What kind of example are you setting for Clara? For the grandchildren? You always said family was everything. What changed?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question, but didn't answer right away. I looked around my small kitchen, still untidy because I refused to tidy up just for someone else. For the first time, I let myself feel the emptiness as space, not absence. Isolated, I wandered through the apartment, touching old photographs, souvenirs from vacations I paid but never chose, books I bought but never read, because there was always something more urgent to do for someone else. I lay down, and a wave of doubt washed through me. Was I cruel? Was this selfishness or survival? Tears started slow and burning, leaving salt on my lips, but I didn't wipe them away. After hours of staring at the ceiling, I remembered every time Clara had forgotten my birthday, every cup of cold coffee I drank, because someone else needed something warm. The old ache returned, but I pressed my hand to my chest. I had never set a boundary. Not once. No one ever asked why, because I never gave them a reason to believe I'd need one. 3 days later, I went for groceries, determined to do something ordinary. Outside, Paolo was waiting by my gate. When I saw him, my fingers gripped the grocery bag so tightly I thought I'd rip it. "You can't just act like this, Anna," he said, standing too close, his voice lowered so passers-by wouldn't hear. "What do you mean, like this?" I asked, the words icy, sharp. He leaned in, searching for softness in my eyes. "Leaving everything. Ruining the family. Clara is a mess. Why can't you just go back to normal?" "I don't want normal. Not your normal. Not anymore." My answer surprised even me. He blinked, not expecting it, his mouth opening as if to protest. "This isn't you. You're being unreasonable. Are you sick?" "No," I replied. "I'm finally healthy." He called me crazy. He called me selfish. Said I was too old for this kind of drama, that maybe I needed a doctor. Every word made me remember 100 smaller moments I had let slide. Things he said that had pressed me down. So quietly, I had barely noticed the shrinking. That night, I blocked Clara's number for the weekend and put Paolo's messages in a folder marked Old Life. I stayed off social media. The apartment was suddenly loud with quiet. My own breathing, the sound of a neighbor's TV, footsteps in the corridor. The world didn't end as I feared. The floor didn't open. Instead, the silence gave birth to something slow and steady inside me. On Monday, Lucia came again, but this time angry, not gentle. "I just want my sister back. You're not acting like you," she snapped. I saw then she wanted the version of me who fixed everyone else's problems. Even her love was conditional, rational, a contract I hadn't signed. I looked at her, steady this time. "Maybe you never really knew me at all." That was the last attempt for now. I set new rules. If anyone disrespected my choices, the conversation would end. My phone lay silent for hours. The space felt like possibility, like spring after a winter too long. In the hush, somewhere deep inside, I felt the smallest bud of pride growing, fragile but unmistakable. This time I watered it with patience, not guilt. The days passed in a heavy, hesitant rhythm. Everything in the house slower, more silentious, filled with a strange air, almost like the aftermath of a summer storm. Humidity sticking to my skin whenever you accordava, eolava alrededor. I thought that after standing up for myself, after saying my long-withheld no, the weight would lessen, the air get lighter. But the world just sat on my chest, pressing, and every mensagem ignored, every telephone call not answered, it grew thicker. On the third morning, when the sun barely filtered through the gray curtain, and everything outside smelled of cold and damp, I found myself restless. Towels had been left to dry in the bathroom for the last week. A pile of correspondence growing on the side table, ignored. The house emanated a palpable neglect, one I almost didn't recognize. As I was taking my coffee alone, I remembered the small wooden box my mother had left me, which I hadn't opened since her death. It sat, mostly forgotten, at the bottom of my bedroom closet. On impulse, I got up, still in pajamas, barely feeling the floor beneath my feet, and reached for it with hands trembling from too much caffeine and too little conviction. It took me a few minutes to unlock the rusty clasp and open the lid. Time seemed to fold in that dim room. The stale smell stung my nose, mingling with the acrid scent of old papers and incense from an envelope tied with blue ribbon. It wasn't my handwriting. My heart pounded in my ears as I slid the envelope from under a stack of yellowing photos and opened it with nervous fingers. Inside there was a single letter, written in ink now faded to gray. As I read, the words first swam, then fell clearly into place. "Dearest Lucia, forgive me for what I've done. When everything became unbearable, all I could think of was protecting you. But that protection wasn't free. I took from your future so you could survive the present. I made promises, on your behalf, that you never agreed to. You will understand one day. I hope you will be able to forgive. Maman." I fell back onto the floor, the paper trembling in my hands. Tears welled up but didn't fall. All those memories, suddenly, returned with edges sharpened and glinting in this new light. My mother, so resolute, so guarded. The quiet warnings, the small but constant sacrifices. Her decision that I forfeit the university scholarship to help take care of my younger siblings. Her always apologetic eyes each time my father raised his voice against me, but never her. The opportunities she saved for me that always meant more chores, more silence, more staying behind. Now, here it was. She had bartered my future. For safety? Maybe. For her own inability to fight? Probably a little. I pressed my fingertips to my eyelids and tried to channel some anger, but all I found was an intense, swirling mixture of grief and a strange release. I suddenly understood why I had always felt trapped, why the demands on me had always seemed non-negotiable, why I conformed. The bars had been welded long before I was old enough to resist, and I'd learned to call them home. The anger came later, slow but persistent like a tide eroding the shore. She had made a deal. I'd paid for it. I stared a long time at the wall, light cracked by the moving shadows of leaves outside. while the meaning of it all slid into place inside me. All my relationships had mirrored this bargain. My mother gave away parts of me. Others took them, and I grew up believing that losing myself was just the cost of being loved or accepted. Slipping to the kitchen table again, the letter next to my hand, I tried to write but ended up just staring at the lines on the notepad. Part of me wanted to scream, to rage, to call everyone who had plucked opportunities from my hands and tell them I knew now, that I finally saw. Instead, I sat, just breathing. I flipped through the rest of the box, a silver brooch, a faded ticket from a bus ride I barely remembered, some tiny knitted booties from when my daughter was born. Everything I touched felt like it vibrated with buried truths. My thoughts wandering, I recalled a moment, years ago, when my mother forbade me from going out with friends on the eve of an important test. Home first, always home first, spoken with that same sorrowful resignation. At the time, I thought she wanted to protect me from the world. Now I saw she was only repeating something done to her, passing it on like an heirloom steeped in doubt. Pressing the letter flat against the table, I felt oddly awake. There was a tingling rush along my arms, as though I had just come up for air after years submerged. Betrayal burned within me, but beneath it was an unmistakable freedom. If the bars had been made by someone else, perhaps I could choose to walk out any time I wanted. The phone vibrated on the table. Another message. My sister again, guilting, asking me why I was acting so distant. Didn't I care for family? I looked at the screen, then at my reflection in the dark glass. Calmly, deliberately, I slid the phone out of reach. I knew, after today, nothing would ever be as it was. I could finally call things by their rightful names. Later, maybe, I would share the letter with my siblings, when I was strong enough. But for now, I pressed my palm to my chest, closed my eyes, and let the old version of me dissolve into the silence. When the sun finally broke through the window, cooling onto the cold floor, I let it warm my curled toes, a small reminder that perhaps there could be light in places I'd long kept in shadow. It was a Tuesday when I decided the time had come for a true confrontation, not only with the others, but with every part of me had been silenced over the years. I woke up before sunrise, my body trembling with anticipation, but it was less fear and more a kind of raw, kinetic energy. Like something new was trying to break through my skin. The kitchen glowed with the faint yellow of streetlights. I drew in a slow breath and looked at the letter on the table. The letter I had found days before, the one that split my story in two. My hands traced its edges, smoothing down the corners as if I could iron out the lies, along with the creases. The words from that letter pulsed in my mind. For a long moment I just stared at it, and then folded it again, tightly, slipping it into my pocket. My armor for today. Sunlight crept through the curtains as I prepared myself. My movements were deliberate, each action a small declaration of presence. Shower, clean clothes, a spritz of perfume that had gathered dust. Today even my skin would refuse to be invisible. When I left the house, the air was fresh, slightly humid after a late night rain. Each step toward the meeting point felt like reclaiming a piece of me that had been lost along the way. My thoughts circled around everything I'd learned, circling back most of all to the people I had once loved without boundaries. The community center, which had hosted years of family parties and fundraisers, stood at the corner of the block. Its chipped yellow walls and faded blue doors looked both welcoming and exhausted. Inside it smelled of old coffee, furniture polish, and something sharp and metallic, lingering from the decades of use. I called ahead to say I needed to meet with them. They came, the ones who mattered. The daughter whose coldness still shocked me, my ex-husband with his over-practiced smile, and Sylvia, who used to call herself my best friend, but had become more of a keeper of secrets. We stood in the small room at the back, beneath a flickering fluorescent bulb. For a moment, the only sound was the static hum of electricity and our own breathing. My daughter began, voice clipped as always. "What is it now, mine? You're not answering our calls." I looked at her, really looked, at the defensiveness in her eyes, the impatience in the way she tapped her nails against her phone. I set my bag on the table and didn't bother sitting down. "I found something," I said, my voice steady but low. "Something that made a lot of things clear, and I need to talk about it, all of it." My ex-husband shook his head, arms crossed. If you're here to make more scenes, this is not the place. We agreed you'd stay quiet for now. I laughed, dry and sharp. That's over. I'm done with quiet. Sylvia moved uncomfortably in her chair. Maria, think carefully about what you're doing. We don't all need to air our dirty laundry. Some things are better left unsaid, I interrupted, looking directly at her. My hands were no longer shaking. That's exactly how I ended up erasing myself all these years. You want me silent, compliant, grateful for whatever leftovers of attention you toss my way. My daughter sighed loudly, but I held up the letter. You all lied, I said, my breath hitching only for a heartbeat. For years you spun a story around me, the helpless woman, the necessary sacrifice. But I read the truth, right here. And I remember now, all the ways you kept me small so you all could shine. I turned to my ex-husband. You withheld things I had a right to know. You made decisions about me, my money, our family, as if I was the maid and not your equal. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sylvia tried again, softer now. Maria, that's not fair. We all struggled. Maybe, I said, voice rising. But there's a difference between struggling and using someone as a cushion for your own fears. I'm not afraid anymore. My daughter, face tight with anger, finally spat. So what? You want us to apologize? To throw a parade for you? After all we've done? I leaned forward, eyes level with hers. I don't want your parade. I don't even want your apologies. I want you to hear the truth. My truth. You all relied on me because you knew I wouldn't walk away. You gambled on my silence, my shame. That's over. My ex-husband tried one last time. This bitterness. What's it for? It's unhealthy. Think about the family. You are nothing without us. I drew a deep breath, letting the sting of that statement echo inside me. And then I let it go. I am something. I always was. I just needed to remember. The air crackled with tension. For a while, no one said anything. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I realized then that my fear was gone. What I felt now was freedom, raw and wild. I reached for the door. No one tried to stop me. As I stepped out into the hallway, the sounds of community drifted in from other rooms. Children laughing, chairs scraping, the heartbeat of ordinary life carrying on. I didn't look back, even when I heard my name called in disbelief behind me. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, warming my face. I felt lighter, as if every step away shed a little more of the weight they'd placed on my shoulders all these years. My story wasn't finished, but for the first time, it belonged to me, and I never, ever looked back. The first light of morning stretches quietly across my new bedroom, painting pale stripes on the wall, where the curtain doesn't quite reach. My old apartment feels larger since I boxed up the things I kept out of obligation and set them out by the door for donation. There's space now, the kind I once didn't even know I craved. I wake up wrapped in crisp sheets that still smell faintly of lavender, breathing in a slow, full breath. I feel the room settling around me, silent and open, and for a moment all I do is exist in that gentle space. I walk barefoot to the kitchen. The tiles are cool, grounding. My favorite mug, chipped a little at the rim, sits waiting for me. I pour the coffee slowly, watching the steam rise, tracing patterns through the sunlight. This is my ritual, simple, mine, undemanding. I don't rush anymore. I sit at my small table, look out over the city, and taste the difference in each swallow. Today there is no shrill voice calling for me to hurry, no hurried footsteps behind closed doors, only the quiet tick of the clock, the hum of the world outside. The living room looks different after all the changes. Bright cushions on the old sofa, a small stubborn plant growing in a blue pot by the window. I open the glass, letting the morning air roll across my skin and through the thin curtains. It smells of bread baking a few floors below, of wet sidewalk and distant flowers, of beginnings. I close my eyes for a moment and just listen. Voices layered from the street, laughter from a nearby balcony, a soft radio song. My world is larger and kinder than it was. A knock on the door makes me smile now, not flinch. It's Marta, my neighbor, bringing back a borrowed book. She stands in the doorway with crinkled eyes, holding out the worn paperback. You were right, she says. The ending's a surprise. Her voice is easy without expectation. We talk for a little while, swapping stories about small victories. She made her own soup for the first time. I finally adjusted the broken shelf in the closet. She laughs, genuinely, as if she sees me. I promise to lend her another book soon. Later, after she leaves, I fold clean laundry in my sunlit bedroom. I touch each shirt, each towel, feeling how soft, how well-loved they are. My hands move slowly, almost reverently. These things are not grand, but they are chosen. I start to hang a picture above the bed, one I bought for myself, bright and abstract, splashed with color. I hammer the nail gently, feeling my arms strong, steady. The final tap echoes, sharp and satisfying, a punctuation mark at the end of an old sentence. At lunch, I chop fresh vegetables and toss them in a bowl, adding oil, lemon, and a pinch of salt. I eat by the open window, letting the sun warm my face. Each bite is a confirmation. I can care for myself. I can nourish myself. I can find pleasure not tied to anyone else's need or mood. The freedom tastes sweet, like tomatoes still warm from the vine. The afternoon brings a walk through the park nearby. The path is dappled with sunlight, roots pushing up through the old stones. Children run ahead, their shouts echoing through the trees. I hold my phone loosely. Messages pop up, invitations from people who know me now as I am, not as a shadow cast by someone else's desire. I say yes to a movie tomorrow, no to an obligation that feels like a burden. My voice has its own weight, finally. I pass a woman on a bench, reading with her shoes off. She looks up, catches my eye, smiles, and I smile back. There is no hesitancy, no fear of judgment, just a silent greeting between two women at peace. I keep walking, breathing in the scent of orange blossoms and damp earth, letting the air move through me like a promise. As dusk falls, I return home and light a lavender candle. The small ritual grounds me in the now. I run a bath, the water swirling around my ankles, breathing it in steam and the clean scent of soap. I rest there, head tilted back, feeling light in my bones. I remember past nights spent lying stiff and anxious, waiting for someone else's anger or disappointment. Now I wash those memories from my skin, letting them fade with the bathwater. Before bed, I write a single line in my journal. Today I lived as I am, for myself. The words settle on the page like a foundation stone. Tomorrow will come with its ordinary challenges and routines, bills, errands, uncertainties. But I have carved a space in the world that is my own, bright and unfolding. I feel it as surely as I feel my heartbeat. The days ahead belong to me. I switch off the light, the city breathing quietly beyond my window. I am here, anchored, and moving forward. I am no longer someone else's reflection. I am myself, unbroken, full of promise. And tomorrow, the sunrise will come for me.